All right, we're back this week with Josh Ortmann from Buffalo. Coach, thanks for joining us today.
Happy to be here. I'm excited to get the text to be a part of it, and it'll be fun.
Well, I'm excited to have you on. I mean, most of the coaches are guys that, I've bumped into here or there. I've talked to maybe only a couple times, but, we go back we graduated high school the same year. Our teams were in the same section growing up and obviously playing against each other in the Mississippi 8 the last handful of years, excluding this year. We've gotten to know each other pretty well, so I'm excited to have you. First thing we always ask is your coaching Wikipedia page. So tell us where you played and then what your coaching journey has been to get to Buffalo High School.
Yeah, so I'm from Buffalo, played at Buffalo High School, graduated in 2007. Then after 2007, went on to St. Cloud State and played 4 years there. And then really didn't have too many intentions on coming back to Buffalo. I was just going to kind of see where teaching jobs took myself. And sure enough, it worked out that Buffalo had a Phi Ed opening, and they offered me a job. And I started out as a 9th grade coach there, then was a 10th grade coach shortly after. And then when Coach Guida decided to go that administration route, I ended up getting the head coach here at Buffalo. So, yeah, that's kind of where I was and how I got to where I am.
How did playing in the NSIC help you transition into coaching?
I was taking some notes as I was getting ready for this, and I think that was one of the best things that has got me to where I am as a coach, because when I was in high school, I kind of had the green light, was able to shoot and kind of score whenever I wanted to. And the offense that we ran was really built around a perimeter type style game where I had a lot of freedom within what we did. And then I'll never forget. So my two biggest impacts, role models, if you want to call them, were Coach Guida, my high school coach, and then Coach Schlegel, my college coach. I remember sitting down in my postseason meeting after my freshman year with Coach Schlegel, and he had said to me that, you need to start realizing that everybody at this level was an all-state caliber player. And like everyone at this level can shoot and score. And if you're going to make it here, you've got to find a way to defend, and you got to be a better defender. And so I went from having a role in high school where really did a lot of scoring and whatnot to college. I think I averaged about 7 points a game, but I went out and guarded every team's best wing player every single night and chased them around all game long. And so I was able to kind of see the best of both worlds, where when you start talking role identification, the value in being a part of what you bring to a team. Being at St. Cloud State was probably the best thing for me for my coaching piece, because it's easy to love basketball and play basketball when you get to score 20 points a game, but then you got to find that deeper love and passion when you got to take a back seat on the offensive side and learn how to chase people on the defensive side and understand you're just as valuable to a team as the guy out there scoring 20, 25 points a game. And so I think that's helped me a lot with how I approach coaching, how I approach our players, and work to get buy-in from everybody top to bottom, no matter if you're the best player on our team or the worst player on our team.
So you talked about Coach Schlegel, obviously, and you had Coach Reimer, who was your assistant coach at the time, who's the head coach at St. Cloud State now. So what did you learn from those guys, Coach Schlegel, Coach Reimer, from your time playing at St. Cloud State that you've been able to use as you transition into coaching high school at Buffalo?
I think the biggest thing is just the attention to detail. Like it sounds cliche and it sounds like a no-brainer, but success doesn't happen on accident. Like you don't just wake up one morning and become really good at something, right? And when you play under Coach Schlegel and Coach Reimer, there's an expectation that this is what you're going to do. And if you don't do it, then somebody else gets a chance. And there isn't always a second chance, a third chance, or a fourth chance. So if you lose out on your opportunity when given that opportunity, then you don't know when that next opportunity is going to come. And both Coach Schlegel and Coach Reimer did such a good job of bringing competition every single day, day in and day out at practice. And I think it's kind of ironic. You watch The Last Dance, which is pretty popular on social media right now, and you hear them talk about their stories, and 90% of the stories they're talking about are what happened in practice. It's not what happened in this game or that game. It's what happened in practice. And I think if you were to talk to myself or a lot of my college teammates, 90% of our stories would be, remember that time in practice. And when you can create a practice environment that's that meaningful and that competitive and that engaging, I think you're naturally going to start to develop some really good basketball players in a really good program. And that's what Coach Schlegel and Coach Reimer did.
You mentioned Nick Gaida earlier, your high school coach, someone that I had the pleasure to be able to play against when I was at Brainerd. You were at Buffalo. We played against you guys, I want to say, my freshman, sophomore, junior year. We didn't play against you your senior year when you guys won the state championship, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. A year that we really had you guys circled on we were the 5 seed. I remember going to Elk River. I'm not gonna say we overlooked the 4 seed, but we really were jacked up for the chance to play you guys in the semifinals. And then we got bagged by Elk River by like 25. But you mentioned Coach Gaida, who someone that I also then was able to coach against for a couple of years before you took over. And I think that he probably would have a really good argument that when he was coaching, was one of the top probably 5 coaches in the state of Minnesota. I was just so impressed with being able to coach against him, see his attention to detail and how great of a coach he was. And what are some things that you learned from Coach Gaida while playing for him, but also while you were the 9th grade and sophomore coach coaching under him?
Yeah, so I got the best of both worlds with Coach Gaida. From a player standpoint, there was just never a day off. The one thing I talk about with Coach Gaida is they say a good coach is able to make practices harder than what a game's going to be. Games were a walk in the park for us compared to what we went through in practice, and that's not an exaggeration. And he did such a good job of pinpointing where were we struggling as a team and what do we got to do to fix it. And I don't think there was anyone better that I've been around that was better at breaking down film than Coach Gaida was, and then seeking out the problem and then finding a solution to it. And we'd work hours upon hours, especially on the defensive end, as far as the way we rotate, the way we close out, the way we take our first steps. And it paid off in the long run. And then you talk about a guy that if you were to watch him coach, people probably said that, oh, he's so loud and he's so vocal and he's maybe brash at times. I think if you were to talk to any of his players, every single one of them would say, well, who's your favorite teacher? Who's your favorite coach? And they'd say Coach Gaida, because he knew how much he loved and cared for us. And there wasn't anyone better at building relationships with kids than Coach Gaida was. And I think that was one of the biggest things I learned at coaching under him was once you have that relationship built, you can get on and you can coach players hard. And when you can coach your best players as hard as you coach anybody else, then you're going to start making it somewhere. And that's what Coach Gaida did. He always got the most out of his teams, whether it was a state championship level team or whether it was a 10-win team. No matter what the talent level was, I don't ever remember looking back and saying, wow, he didn't get the most out of that team. And I think he got there, 1, because of the relationships he built, but then 2, because of how difficult he made practices and made it so much easier for his players come game time.
It's funny you mentioned how loud he would be during games. I remember my first year, we won 9 games and we weren't very good. We had a couple decent players, but we weren't very good. We played you guys at St. Cloud State, and it was it was like a random, because I think it was like there's an election or a caucus night or something. So it was like a Monday night game at St. Cloud State, and there's no one there. And Jack Sinkle, who was our shooter, who averaged like 25 points a game, he'd make 5 or 6 threes again. I think he had like 8 threes against you guys. And I remember that second half, it was like a single-digit game, and he just lit into the guys. And I was like so proud. I was like, yes, we got Gaida to blow up on his team because of this. And it was such an honor for us because he is such a good coach. And you knew if he blew up, it's because he cared about his guys and it's because he wanted to win that game. And it was important to him. But I do want to talk about a little bit about with the film stuff that Coach Gaida would do, because we're lucky today. We have huddle and we have everything broken down, where you're talking, 10, 12 years ago, 13 years ago, where coaches didn't have that. It might have been a CD-ROM or a DVD. So what did that film session look like playing for him?
Yeah, I vividly remember I was a TA for him my senior year of high school, a teacher assistant, and I'd be sitting in the coach's office, and it'd literally be on a VHS player, and then he'd burn it onto a disc, and then we'd watch it on a projector, and it's the typical remote fast forward, rewind, and every single game he'd spend about 4 hours minimum just breaking down the statistical pieces and then just what we were doing as a team. And if you ever get to sit in a film session with Coach Gaida, take advantage of it, because he's second to none when it comes to the detail, especially on the defensive end with what it should look like and what good teams need to get to by the end of the season in order for you to put yourself in a spot to be successful. And so, yeah, it's a lot different than it is now. There was no huddle. There was no huddle assist or anything like that. And And he spent hours upon hours in front of that screen, making sure he was doing his part and putting us in a position to be successful.
So the interaction on Twitter before this, when I threw out the question today, is a lot of people want to hear about the state tournament run. So maybe this isn't relevant to anyone in learning how to coach, but I think it'd be cool to hear your story, because so much with Class 4A, it's been dominated the last handful of years with the Hopkinses of the world, the Apple Valleys. But you were a team who, obviously Buffalo now in the Lake Conference at the time was kind of an outstate big school when you guys won the state championship in 2007. So just talk about that high school state tournament run, some of the memories that you remember from that, and things that you learned over that run.
Yeah, we're in a unique spot. I feel like Buffalo's in a spot where when they're counting who's a metro school and who's not a metro school, if they want to count us a metro school, they'll count us one. But then when they want to count us as an outstate school, they'll count us as an outstate school. So we're kind of right on the border there. But yeah, that state championship run, it's hard to explain. And anyone who's been around Buffalo basketball obviously knows it was a special time for our community and what we did. And I think it brought us together to where, to this day, darn near however many years later, you come to a Buffalo basketball game on a Tuesday night in the middle of February, and it's going to be a full gym because of what Coach Guida was able to establish back then. But I think the coolest thing we did, and we try to continue it to this day, is we do what's called a 50,000 shot summer program. And it's turned into a 25,000 shot made program to where you focus on the shots that you make. But I'll never forget, from 6th grade on, for myself, I had myself and a couple of my high school teammates at the time who were my best friends, where we'd track every one of our shots, and we'd call each other at night, and I'd say, well, how many shots are you at? And he was like, well, 650. Well, then I was going to make sure I was at 651 just to make sure we got on top. I beat him in it. And we were able to create an environment where all of a sudden we had 8-9 guys doing that in a summer within a 2-grade span. And now all of a sudden we were able to fill the floor with a bunch of kids that could shoot the ball, who had put in that time and investment. Because if you're going to go out, let's say you shoot 600-700 shots, that's going to take you a good probably 2 hours to do it. The kids just don't do that. Like they want to go play 5-on-5. They don't want to go spend time on their craft, working on their game. And we were able to put ourselves in a spot where we had a lot of kids who put a lot of sweat equity into it. And we got hot at the right time, and we played really good basketball at the right time. And I think our final record that year was 28-3. And we were able to play at a really high level, and people talk about what we were able to do offensively, but I think what gets overlooked was what we got done on the defensive end, where you talk about 5 guys playing as one. On the defensive end, we had 5 guys playing on one string at all times that not only wanted to win for themselves, but you invest so much time and effort into it, to where I don't want to let Carl Olson down. I don't want to let Darren Olmscheid down, because I know how much time they put into it, and I'm not going to be that guy who ruins it for our team. And so we had a pretty special bond, pretty special thing going. The cards fell our way, and it was fun to see it play out the way that it did.
You got injured in your state tournament run. Talk about how that whole situation. I remember the scene after watching on TV when you guys won your semifinal game and you were hurt and you and Guida were embracing, and it was really powerful. So talk about that situation, getting to that point, but then dealing with the injury that you faced and how you're able to deal with that adversity.
Yeah, I mean, it was heartbreaking. I truly, to this day, don't know if there's ever been anyone who's put more time into high school basketball as a player than I did. Like, it was every morning, every night. I was out in my cul-de-sac shooting baskets because I wanted to play at such a high level. And then that happened, and I was devastated, but yet so proud, because like, you had so many of my teammates that weren't going to let one thing that happened in a game ruin what was best for our team. And so that part was cool. But I'll never forget, we were staying at the hotel down in Minneapolis, and I forget what hotel it was. And one of our assistant coaches, Jason Sorensen, came in, and he said, so you're going to be ready to go tomorrow? And I said, Sore, I can't even walk. There's not a chance. And he had just said to me, you'll never get this opportunity back. Find a way. And sure enough, like, it just, you get some adrenaline going, and you find a way. And I didn't do much more than run 3-point line to 3-point line that state championship game, but it was still pretty cool to be out on the court.
Yeah, you guys had quite the game against Armstrong too. There's that clip. I know it was actually going around. I think a year or so ago. Going, people were talking. I think Coach Miller got that going on Twitter when you guys hit like 7 threes back and forth, and Orion James got in on it. Just talk about that game. Obviously, Olmsted had the buzzer beater drive to finish it to win it. So just the state championship game, obviously huge crowd, having a tight game. Talk about that experience.
Well, we were all pissed that Coach Miller called a timeout. He ruined one of the best moments in high school basketball. We just kept trading threes back and forth, and he ruined the run. But no, I'm just giving Coach Miller a hard time. It's hard to even explain. It was two extremely good high school basketball teams that played the game the right way, and all those kids we played against on Armstrong, we played all through AAU the last few years leading up to it, so everybody kind of knew who everyone was, and we were fortunate to be one basket better than them on that day. And it was, you look at the crowd, I think up until recent years, it was one of the biggest crowds in Minnesota State high school history, where it was just all purple and red, and it was a pretty speechless type environment. And I think in both probably Plymouth and Buffalo, there weren't too many things going on other than watching that state tournament, and it was pretty cool.
Like I said, for a good way, right? There's a lot of good 4A teams. There's a lot of Division I talent in our state, and there was our year. There's a ton of great players in Class 4A. That Cole Aldrich and Blake Hoffarber, just to name a couple. But it was just cool to see two teams that don't traditionally make it, and that's really what high school basketball is all about. You guys have made a few state tournaments since. Armstrong has made the state tournament since, but just two teams that that's what high school basketball. It's not about necessarily having the same two teams year in and year out meeting for the 4A state championship, which is good, right? When there's good talent in the court, that's great, and that's fun to watch too. But there's just something a little bit more when there's two teams that have a really special group and the communities can get behind. Because I remember when we were at the state tournament a couple of years ago, and I'm not knocking, and it might have been spring break, I'm not going to knock the 4A programs that we went to watch, but we had the biggest crowd as a 3A team in the state semifinals than any of the 4A teams that we watched later in the evening. And I just think that when you get those communities that maybe haven't went, we hadn't went for 87 years. I don't know what you guys were at when you guys hadn't made the state tournament. But just that those communities that haven't been there for so long, I think it's really powerful to have those people experience that. And it's really it gets to the heart of what high school basketball is all about.
Yeah, and you're spot on, and it pulls the community together. And I think when you look at the formats of everything, you can talk about different teams that had different players, but at the end of the day, come playoff time, you got to win games. And you might have the best player in the state of Minnesota, but you still got to win games to get there. And you saw it. You guys won the games you needed to get there, and we've won the ones we've needed to get there, just like Armstrong did. And it's pretty special when you see two communities come together like they did that year.
All right, so I'm going to bring in a pop culture reference here. Are you a One Tree Hill? Have you ever watched One Tree Hill before?
Not a big One Tree Hill person.
No, so, okay, I got into it when I was in college, and so I need to just listen through this. So generally speaking, right, the two kids, brothers, estranged brothers end up playing basketball together, and the one goes on to play in the NBA. The other one, they win a state championship in their hometown. And then 4 years later, he comes back and he's coaching in his high school. And I always think to myself, I don't tell my assistants this because I don't want them to run out the door and not coach for me anymore. I always chuckle because I think of the scene in One Tree Hill. Whenever we would go to Buffalo, his first day of practice, he's like, if you need my credentials, and he points up to the banner. It's really corny, like CWTV, but I always laugh to myself because I think of you in that same situation when you took over at Buffalo. So talk about coaching in your hometown and just kind of the natural cred that you have by being a state champion and having the banner up every single day in practice.
Well, I've never pointed to the banner. I'll tell you that much.
You got to.
But no, I think we've gotten to a point where a lot of the kids that are coming through our program now had no idea who I was as a player, which makes it pretty cool. The parents and the older crowd kind of remembers that time, but hopefully our coaching staff has created a relationship, an environment where they look at us more from the coaching piece than they do the player piece. And I'm fortunate on my coaching staff right now, two of our assistant coaches were my high school assistant coaches. And so we've had some really good stability, but you've played at Buffalo, you've been there, you've seen it. It's a really prideful place when it comes to boys basketball. And I think that's one of the things that makes it most special for me is are there other opportunities in different places? Yeah, there are, but the grass isn't always greener somewhere else. And when you're in a place where You have an administration in a community that respects you for who you are, what you stand for, and what you do. That's beyond the game of basketball. It makes coming to work every single day pretty darn fun. And then just being back in Buffalo, my wife is from Andover, and she's got to be a part of. It's a small town, but we're still kind of a pretty big area with a big school, but everywhere you walk, it's hey coach Ortmann, how you doing? And to be able to see so many familiar faces is pretty special to me. And I'm getting to a point now, it's making you and I sound old, but we're starting to get kids in our youth program that were high school classmates of mine. And so that part's pretty cool. And I don't know, it's a special place. I'm lucky to be where I am, and got a lot of support from the community, one as a player, but hopefully two now as a coach, and what we've been able to do with the types of teams we've put on the floor the past few years.
I always love going to your school because when we were in the same conference with you guys, you know, there's good athletic programs, good basketball programs. Then all of a sudden you have the Buffalo and the St. Michael and the Rogers games, and all three of you guys are in our conference. Like, oh, this is just a completely different environment, the huge, campus-like feel, and it just no matter. But when you walk in there, you have that trophy case. And I always pay my couple-minute respect there to look over the clipboard, and they got the net and the pictures and the articles from your state championship run. So it's pretty cool. But you guys are a big school, like you mentioned. I'm sure you're graduating over 500 kids or so.
Yeah, right, high 400s. Yep.
And so you guys got a little bit too good for us in the Lake or in the Mississippi 8. You didn't want to play us in the North Branches and the Cambridges anymore. And you're like, we got to go on to bigger and better things. No, but you guys did transition to the Lake Conference. I didn't really shed too many tears, except for the fact of not being able to see you and Joe and Kyle or Derek. Sorry, Kyle obviously Big Lake step down or move, but see you three guys. But when you guys left, I told everyone, well, how was it with those guys leaving? It's like, great. I was 1-17 in 6 years against those three teams, and the only win was we beat Rogers by 2 their last year. So I was happy to see you guys leave from a competitive standpoint. But talk about the transitioning to the Lake Conference. Obviously, playing Eden Prairie, Hopkins, Wayzata, Edina, different than North Branch and Princeton and Big Lake and Monticello. So just talk about that transition, switching conferences.
Yeah, it's been a whirlwind. I'll be completely honest with you, and it's been a lot of fun. Fortunately, all the coaches in the Lake Conference have been absolutely fantastic and super welcoming and very supportive of us and St. Michael and everything we do and what we stand for. And it's been great, and they've treated us really well. It's been a gauntlet, though. I'll be very honest with you. People always say, well, we played Wayzata one time, or we played Hopkins one time, and we played Eden Prairie another time. Well, there's a difference between sprinkling in teams like that on your schedule to every Tuesday and Friday night. That's who you have. And any Tuesday and Friday night when you're in the grind of a conference schedule where you have a 3-minute lapse at any time in a game, and you just went from a close game to it's a 30-point blowout. And it's not an exaggeration. It is an absolute gauntlet, but it raises a level of expectation. It raises a standard within your program. And we've always wanted to be considered a top tier basketball program in the state of Minnesota at the 4A level. And if you're going to be a top tier program, then you got to not only play the best teams, but you got to learn how to beat the best teams. And I was really, really proud of our group. We went through some adversity with losing a couple players that we initially thought we were going to have going into this season. And there was a lot of unknown and a lot of people who I think had kind of put us off the calendar because of the two kids that we had lost. And looking at the way we persevered and how resilient we were, our kids came together, and it was fantastic. And one thing that we talk about all the time is our mindset and our mentality. And as a coaching staff, we didn't give our kids excuses, and we didn't give any of us coaches excuses. There's no feeling sorry for ourselves. We're going to prepare, and we're going to be different and practice different, and we're going to find a way to win where maybe we're not as individually talented as some of the teams we're going to play, but collectively as a unit, what do we got to do and what do we got to look like to be successful against these teams and give ourselves a chance to win on a nightly basis. And the preparation that our kids put forth was fantastic. And it was great at times. It sucked at times, but overall, I mean, you can't ask for a better competition night in and night out. And I think come postseason, I really believe we were better because of it.
The people listening to this isn't just Josh either, just like saying this because he knows people are going to listen. This is exactly how he is as a coach, which is why I have so much respect for what Josh has done and how he coaches his teams. Is we'll text a couple times a month throughout the season. It's the same thing. We're not going to feel sorry for ourselves. We're going to play who we play. We're going to get better. And it's just what I think has empowered your team to be so successful since you've taken over. Continue the success that was there from when you took over. Now, I talked in the previous podcast for our program at Princeton. When I took over, I saw ourselves playing in a more northern section. So I knew where we could have an advantage was by playing fast, because, year in and year out, we're probably going to have, and no knocking any of the teams in our section, we have a lot of kids that are able to play at a high level with our conference or through AAU that maybe some of the northern schools aren't able to have. So we thought we're going to play fast because that's going to give us a competitive advantage in our section. What are some of those like money ball or type hidden advantages or things that you found from when you were at the Mississippi 8, but now transitioning to the Lake Conference that gives you a little bit of an advantage, or at least helps you close the gap with some of those more talented teams?
Yeah. So this is going to sound a little weird, but and I really want our kids to be successful in the Lake Conference. I want us to do well. But one thing we do every year as a coaching staff, we evaluate what's our section going to look like and what do we got to do to be successful come March within our section. And then if a conference championship and conference wins and all that come along the way with it, great. But we want to play for section finals, and we want to give ourselves a chance to play in the state tournament year in and year out. And one of the things that we found for us is quite frankly, we're just kind of different than other schools in the lake. Like, this isn't a knock on anybody, but like if you play fourth grade traveling basketball at Buffalo, you're probably going to play varsity basketball at Buffalo by the time you make it through. And a lot of the teams on our schedule, that isn't necessarily the way, because it's just how basketball's evolved down in the cities. And so one of the things that we've had to try and do, what do we got to do if individually we're not maybe as talented position by position, but gives our team the best chance to win? And we truly believe in motion offense, and we believe in a pack line defense. And our goal is to force teams to shoot as many contested jump shots against us as they can. And if you hit 15 threes against us and beat us, we pat you on the back and we move on. And I think back to our last year in the Mississippi 8, Cambridge was 20 of 41 from three on us. And part of it was because we played bad defense. The other part of it was because they shot the ball really well. And the next night we were able to come back and we beat Maple Grove on the road. And so that's kind of our defensive philosophy. And then our offensive philosophy, a lot of teams that have kind of geared towards dribble drive offense and geared towards pick and roll offense, continuity and whatnot. And this is the coach guide inside of me. We run 5-out motion offense, and we'll find post-up opportunities within our 5-out motion offense, but we want to force as many teams to guard us through different off-ball screening actions, because throughout the course of a game, kids guarding screens away from the ball will eventually make mistakes. And if we have our guys taught and understanding how to make their reads coming off each screen, eventually we're going to make you pay. And we believe if we can get at least 2 ball reversals, we think we can get a layup, a free throw, or a wide open 3 at some point within those 2 to 3 ball reversals in a possession. And so our offense is a little different. We don't necessarily set a ton of ball screens. We don't necessarily focus on dribble drive opportunities. We focus on getting our teammates open, finding flare screens, finding slip cuts, finding curl cuts and second cutters. And not everyone's used to guarding that every day in practice, which I think helps us as the year goes on, as we get better at running our motion offense and teams aren't used to guarding that many screens within a possession. I think that gives us a better chance offensively to score, rather than try and take our guy one-on-one and go dribble drive against guys that are maybe more superior athletes than us.
One thing I liked in your offense that you guys did a really good job of was the 29-foot dribble up 3 that you guys made at a high rate the last 3 years. Talk about how you – no, I'm kidding. You also said Matt Willard, who was a phenomenal scorer and probably one of the best, if not the best pure scorer in the state of Minnesota this past year, who was always a treat to coach against, because he's one where he hits a Dirk Nowitzki fadeaway as a freshman. You're like, oh, well, I mean, we can't guard that. Good for him. So I really love the 29-foot dribble up 3. That was a good shot, and I'm sure every time that shot went up, I'm sure you were thrilled.
Yeah, that's where you start talking about role identification and equal opportunity. Some kids get a longer leash with some of that stuff than others, and Matt's we were fortunate the last 4 years to get to have Matt within our program, and he's a prolific scorer. And but one of the unique things about Matt is you see some of the shots that he takes. He spends a half hour every day after practice genuinely working on those types of shots. And so when you see it in a game, it's like, well, I've seen it every single day in practice. You've seen him make it every single day in practice. It's just starts to become part of what we do. And we were fortunate to have guys like Antonio Blewett, Brandon Motz, Tony Dahl around him that were able to help put Matt in good situations. But then when teams would really start to try and take Matt away, then they got to feed off of that, and they got some pretty easy scoring opportunities themselves.
But no seriousness, let's dive into obviously I know you're not teaching the 29-foot pull-up. Like you said, the kid's working on it and he's hitting it at a 30 to 40% rate. Let him fire away. What are some of your main teaching points in your motion?
Yeah, so we obviously, like any offense, it doesn't matter if you're running a continuity offense or a motion offense. We teach spacing, right? Every good offense needs to have good spacing. But then we always talk about every action we have needs to have someone fill in a balance point, needs to have somebody at the rim. So like if I pass the ball and I screen away, if the guy curl cuts it at the rim, I got to fill back to a balance point. If I slip it, he's got to fill to a balance point. And so a lot of it depends on where the defense is playing and how they're playing us. Selfishly, we like it when teams really get up into us away from the basketball and try and get physical with us, because then away from the ball, I can manipulate the type of cut that I'm going to make, where I'm going to make a cut that I want to make, and I can kind of dictate what's going to happen. Whereas if a team's maybe sagging off more and not being as physical on the perimeter, now that takes a couple of our reads out of what we're maybe trying to do. And so we always fill balance points, fill the rim, and then the spacing is crucial, obviously. But the main thing that we try and do is, when you got to headhunt, you got to be vocal with where you're going, and then it starts to become nonverbal communication. You can see where the defense is at. I know my teammate's going to slip, so I'm going to fill. Or I know he's trailing him, so he's going to curl, so I need to fill back. They're switching. I'm going to slip. He's going to fill. And it just really becomes routine with what we do. And it's something that we start at the third grade level. And we have a whole scope and sequence through where we give all of our traveling coaches a K-12 blueprint every year, where this is what we expect you to teach at this level. And motion offense looks really, really ugly a lot of times. And a lot of times at the varsity level, it looks ugly. But then when kids really start to learn how to read a defense, the sky's the limit with what you're capable of doing. And it's worked out well for us in the long term, from where Coach Guida started it, and then I've kind of taken over with some of it.
You use the term balance point. Can you clarify that for anyone writing notes down?
Yeah, so balance points are we have 5 balance points within our motion offense: the 2 baseline spots, the 2 wing spots, and then the top of the key spot. And each balance point is within 12 to 15 feet of one pass to another. And any action you make, you need to fill the next closest balance point to where the ball came from, so you're not leaving someone hanging on the opposite side. And that's just kind of the terms and phrases we use. And we really preach slips, curls, and flares hard within what we do.
So you mentioned you always want someone curling to the rim, then also someone filling a balance point. How do you navigate the waters or balance that off when a guy does have a driving lane and not having someone curl right into a drive?
Yep, and that's where it can get really mucky sometimes, and that's where it takes time, where you got to get used to who you're playing with and what each player on your team does well with, because obviously you have guys with different strengths and different abilities. And we always say, when you're away from the ball, you just chill and read what's happening. And so if a guy has it on the left wing and he's attacking baseline, for example, everyone's going to slide and shift 1 balance point, where we'll have a crack back on one side, and then we'll slide to open balance points to flow on the other side. And so it really turns into understanding where the basketball is and where the next passing angle is going to come from. And so we'll work our crackbacks, we'll work our pitchbacks, and then we'll obviously work on any type of drive action where we want our cutter to come from and where we want to slide to the next balance point away from the basketball.
So let's go 1, 2, 3 down the different ways teams can guard your screens. What do you do against switch? Without sharing all of your details. If you got some secret stuff, I don't want Coach Schnettler or Coach Tesdall sniping any of these if they're listening.
No, there's no secret to what we do. It's just trying to take advantage of what teams doing. When teams are switching, we try and slip as often as we can. In order to be a good slipping team, you darn well better be a good passing team. And if you're not a good passing team, you're going to struggle to take advantage of those slip cut opportunities. When teams are being physical and fighting through, if they're chasing, we really look to curl and fill. And if they're not chasing, we'll get straight cuts out of it, and then we'll look to slip from there. Like you've seen, we also do incorporate a really small portion of some dribble drive with teams that really, really want to get high, deny, and get and pressure out into the full court with some of our spread type options that we have, where we'll put some shooters in the corner and then let three of our more aggressive ball handlers like to attack the basket. But if teams are switching, we're really going to start to slip hard in different facets and try and take advantage of that. And if teams are fighting through, then that's when our curls and flares really become kind of true to what we do.
How do you rep your motion stuff in practice, keeping it competitive and also keeping it like you talked about with Coach Guida, what you learned from him, making practices tougher than games? So how do you put those pieces together?
Yeah, so we're kind of different. I know there's a lot of people who teach through 5-on-5, do a ton of 5-on-5 and teach situations from there. We break it down. We do some sort of 2-on-1 cutters, we call it, every single day, where basically we have a guy that's guarding the guy coming off the screen, and then they're playing 1-on-1 out of it. So if he's trailing me, I'm going to curl it, and I'm going to play 1-on-1 out of it. If he shoots the gap on it, I might flare it, and then we're going to play 1-on-1 out of it. So we literally do 2-on-1 cutters every single day of practice. We do some sort of curl cut and flare cut shooting drills every single day of practice. And like I said before, we start that in third grade, and we try and work it all the way up to where when they get to high school, it becomes pretty natural and pretty fluid to what they're doing, and it's not nothing new. And so we do a ton of 2-on-1, a ton of 2-on-2, and a ton of 3-on-3, and then hopefully that translates into our 5-on-5 sequences throughout practice.
I'm going to take a hot take here, hot position here. I think anyone who's not having their youth coaches run 5 out is making a grave mistake with player development in their program. I know we do the same thing. We're having our guys run 5 out at the youth level. I think if you start running any sort of continuity, or you start saying you're a post, we're going to run 4-out motion around you, and now that kid peaks, he's 5'10" in 6th grade, but now he's 5'11" as a sophomore. That kid has no chance to be successful as a basketball player. And I love that you guys run the 5 out at the youth level. I want you to go talk a little bit more some of the layers that you're looking to run at 3rd grade versus 6th grade versus 8th grade.
Yeah, so within our blueprint that we have that each traveling coach gets, when you're really 3rd and 4th grade, we're looking just to pass, cut, and fill. I mean, pass, cut, fill, pass, cut, and fill. And I think back to our game against Moorhead for our section semifinal game, Cripes, we saw how much they were taking advantage of trying to jump passing lanes on the perimeter. That's how elementary our offense was in the section semifinal game this year against Moorhead. All we did was pass and cut, and we had a lot of success doing it. And then as they get to 5th grade, we talk about screening away, curl, fill. We introduce that at 5th grade. Hopefully by the time they're 5th grade, they're at a sufficient level of passing and cutting. Then by the time they get to 6th grade, they're at a sufficient level of curl fills to where now we'll start to incorporate slip cuts. And then by the time they get through 8th grade, hopefully every kid that's been through our traveling program, that by the time they get to a 9th grade level, they can pass and cut, they can curl fill, they can slip and fill, and then they can straight cut and slip. And then if you have that foundation of those 3-4 things, now we can start to get creative with how we manipulate that within our offense come the varsity level by the time those kids make it to the varsity team.
That's good stuff. And I think anyone listening, I'd rewind the last minute of what Josh said. That's just what I feel like. Personally, I feel very strongly. That's what every youth level should look like. Because, again, I think if you're letting your teams run flex, or you're letting your teams run ball screen continuity where only 2 guys are setting ball screens, and you're just really putting kids in a box that they shouldn't be in at the youth level. So I think that's great that you're doing that. It's worked for you guys. You guys have had sustained success at Buffalo since, I mean, since when I don't know much about Buffalo's history pre 2004, 2005 when we were playing you guys on a regular basis, but there's just been sustained success. And if there was a down year, there's a good year coming the next year behind it. So I think that's a lot of that foundation can be attributed to what you guys run at the youth level. And I think that's awesome. I do want to get more into practices. We teased it a little bit when we talked about your motion stuff, but generally speaking, maybe breaking outside of just your motion breakdowns, what do your practices look like?
Yeah, so every day we start practice out just with defensive slides and closeouts. Closeouts are the hardest thing to guard in basketball. They're difficult. They're a son of a buck. So we work on that every single day. We really work on our first step. Can you guard your yard 3 feet to the right, 3 feet to the left, and that's something we stress with our kids. Then we'll get into a offensive breakdown series. Then we'll get into a transition series into possessions. And then we'll work to our defensive breakdown into a defensive transition. And defensively, we work a ton on odd number defenses. Because very rarely, other than made baskets, are you playing 5-on-5 half court offense or half court defense. And so we really work on playing 5-on-4 defensively. How are we scrambling? How are we rotating? Throw a fifth player in there as we get going, and then get back to the backbone of who we are and what we do. And then we'll work on some sort of situation every single day, whether it's we'll end practice with baseline out of bounds, 2 seconds left. This is what we're running, to where when we get to an end of game situation, nothing new gets drawn up. Every kid knows that if there's 7 seconds left and we got to go the length of the court, this is exactly what we're running. Or if there's 3 seconds left, side out, we need a 2 or we need a 3. This is exactly what we're running. And so they're prepared for those moments in that regard. And then we'll end each practice with some sort of 5-on-5 situation type thing, just depending on where we're at in the season. And so we'll get O breakdown, D breakdown, transition, offense and defense, and then obviously full court 5-on-5 stuff just about every single day. And then as the season gets going, we're obviously not practicing 2 hours come February 17th or whatever. We'll condense it down. We'll break it down. And as the season goes on, we get more skill work into what we're doing within our team concepts as well. And so just depends where we're at in a season. But we spend, I would say, and this might be backwards, but I would say we spend 60 to 70% of what we do defensively transitioning to what we want to get to on offense. And then we'll spend that other 30-40% on breaking down our offense and our motion offense and what we're trying to get out of there.
One thing you've talked about is your relationships with players and building those role identifications. So talk about how you have those tough conversations and ways you approach that and how you identify roles with your players.
Yeah, it's not easy. And any coach that's been through the ringer with it knows that. That's probably the toughest part of coaching is getting kids to buy into something that they maybe don't want to buy into. And we preach on a daily basis. We don't necessarily just want to be physically tough, but we want to be mentally tough. And we use the quote every single day. Are you willing to do what's best for the team, even when it's not what's best for yourself? And with basketball, when you start getting towards the end of a varsity season, you got a 7, maybe 8-man rotation out of your entire high school program. That's a tough number to cut down to, but it's an important number to cut down to, and getting kids to understand these are the types of shots that I should be taking within our offense. And these are the types of shots that we need to get within our offense. Anyone who's watched us the last few years that's seen Matt and Brandon, for example, they know that at any time within our offense, if they had an open 3, they got the green light to shoot it whenever they want to, but they've earned that green light and they've put hours upon hours into their craft to earn that green light. Whereas we got kids that are maybe really good football players, but basketball's not their favorite sport or their number one sport. That's fine. Go be out there, bang, rebound for us, and do little things, dive on the floor for loose balls. That's going to bring something to our team that maybe someone else can't bring to us. And when you can build the relationship outside of basketball, it makes those in basketball conversations 10 times easier. And that's where I just think I'm lucky I get to teach in the building that I coach, because you get to joke around and see those kids on a daily basis and hold them accountable in class, so you can hold that same standard outside of class, and they're not seeing 2 different guys on the floor and off the floor type of thing.
Coach, I know you got to run here. I appreciate you coming on. I wrote a ton of notes down. There's a lot of questions I didn't get to. I think that's the difference when I'm not a professional journalist. Interviewing isn't my backbone, but it's someone that I've known and had these same type of conversations with when we're not being recorded through a video conferencing website. So a lot of great stuff here. I think this is one that I think a lot of coaches should go back and re-listen to, because there's no program I don't think that runs better 5-out motion in the state than Buffalo, and no coach who has done as good of a job. And I tweeted this out when you guys beat Edina. I think there's no knocking anyone else. I think you're one of the best coaches in the state, and you've done just a phenomenal job. And there's no one else that, no team or program that I root for outside of Princeton that I do for Buffalo. So just want to congratulate you guys on the success you have, and thanks again for coming on.
I appreciate it, Brett. Thanks for having me, and look forward to keep following you along through this journey.
Thanks, Josh.